All right, everybody, welcome back. Stocks by the numbers, and I wanted to do a quick overall look into Eve Holding Incorporated, ticker symbol EVEX, listed here on the New York Stock Exchange. Stock closed 299, down a couple of cents after hours, flat on the day. And this company is an evtol, electric vehicle takeoff landing company, RoboTaxi. Look at this freaking thing. And supposedly they're saying that, they're going to try to roll out well, they already rolled out the prototype, but they're going to try to, I guess, do like their test flight, potentially the end of 24, going into 25. But they're saying that they're not going to be fully operational, I believe, until 2026. I know they recently did an offering. They raised some money. The stock obviously took a hit. We know that when that usually happens. But they're saying that they have enough cash now until basically tail end 26, going into 27. So this is a situation where almost similar to something like an ASTS, right? Where the company came out, we laid out this timeline. We know that we have a handful of objectives to reach, right? A bunch of milestones that we have to hit. And each time one is hit, we might see a little bump in the stock. But until we hit the point of actual completion to where we're going to begin actually building and rolling out these robo-taxis, then technically the stock can stay in this downtrend and might not see a lot of bullish momentum for, maybe the next 12 months. But over the long term, it does sound like a decent idea. Again, there's going to be supposedly a pilot. Right now they're saying 4 passengers, and it's basically going to lift you up, off the ferry or whatever and take you in. And obviously you're going to be flying through the air. But this was a SPAC, as we see, came out $10 like they do back in 2022, was bouncing up and down for a little bit, had a big dip, ran back to where it was, and then it's just basically been in the downtrend since it looks like about middle of 2023. Now, in my opinion, looking at the numbers here, we can make the argument that we're overvalued. And again, going back to something like ASTS, I know we had the announcements with the telecoms like Verizon and AT&T come a little early, and that kind of helped kickstart and jumpstart the bump and the run-up in the stock. Something like EVEX, again, they rolled out their prototype. They said, I believe it was July 22nd or July 21st maybe, and you can see that the stock, we had a little bit of a bump, but we basically just kind of stayed flat, and then we ended up dropping down. Now, the one thing I will say about this company is this. If we go back looking at the last several quarters, I will say that even though we know that they're going to obviously operate at a loss until we actually get up and running, the good thing is they're bleeding less than Wall Street expects, and they're basically doing this consistently quarter over quarter. So even though the stock may continue to downtrend, I still say that technically it's not as bad as it can be. And even though we might be on a longer time frame, again, year and a half, 2 years until the stock really starts moving, the point is that it won't get completely decimated. Now, I drew out this trend line here, and it does kind of suck because, again, because we're operating at a loss and because we don't have anything really of urgency right here in the immediate short term, we can potentially break down and test this bottom trend line, which, as you see, could be as low as like 140, 130. So in my opinion, we do have the potential to hit new 52-week lows here. However, if you notice today, there was a pretty decent amount of volume coming into this stock. And we'd have to go, again, all the way back to almost day one, really, before we had that volume. So if we look here, we can see volume came in today, 3.11 million shares traded hands today. Average daily volume less than 300,000 shares. So roughly, 10, 11 times average daily volume. But what's catching my eye is, hold on, let me readjust here. What's catching my eye is since this last earnings report, right? We had the big spike down, and then we had the rebound, and now we've kind of just had this tightening, channeling upwards. So in my opinion, it does kind of appear like we may be running into an ascending wedge, which technically is bearish, which means we may break and come back down to the mid-low twos. But also, if for some reason someone knows something and everyone's piling in, then we might have a premature breakout and we could potentially retest maybe this fib right here of about 333. There's a 1-year chart, by the way. 333 top fib level. And I believe we also have a resistance level of maybe like in the 340s we'll get to in a second. But if we look at some of the recent news here, yeah, we saw the news when we looked at Rolls-Royce that Embraer tapped the Rolls-Royce former exec right there. But overall, even though we still have potentially, again, 1, 2, 3 years before the company's really up and running, it seems like most analysts are pretty bullish on it. And you can see that price target maintained here, $5 a share by Cantor Fitzgerald. Eve Holding initiated as a buy from H.C. Wainwright, price target $6 a share. So again, remember, the company said technically they're still going to need more time, but in the moment, most analysts are still pretty bullish on it. Most price targets are higher than this current stock price here of about $3 a share. And average outperform rating and a price target range of 5 to 8. So pretty much every analyst is giving a buy or an overweight rating and a higher price target than where the stock is currently trading. So if you're going to tell me in the comments, I like it for the long term, I've been buying it down here in the 3s and in the 2s, then chances are, no one can really call you crazy. Because if it does, again, do everything according to plan, then we know what's going to happen. You might be sitting pretty. You may turn around, 2 years from now, stock's back up at $7, $8, $10 a share, right? So if we truly believe in the long-term potential, then I can understand if you're pretty bullish on this. And it does sound like a cool idea, right? We actually just have to reach the point where we're actually manufacturing the robo-taxis. And then more importantly, we have to make sure that people actually want them and use them, right? Because we can come up with a great idea. We could roll out, a dozen, 5 dozen of these robo-taxis. But if people aren't really taking the rides, then obviously that's going to be an issue. But it seems like everyone's pretty optimistic and welcoming to this new idea of the evtol robo-taxi. Cantor Fitzgerald upgrades to overweight from neutral, raises price target to 5 from 7. Wait, raises price target to 5 from 7. Okay. This was the last earnings report that came out roughly 6 weeks ago, the first week of August. Aerospace company, EVTOL stands for Electric Vehicle Takeoff and Landing Aircraft. Okay, we're reading, Eve is pre-revenue. We do not expect meaningful revenues, if any, during the development phase of our aircraft. Which is pretty self-explanatory. We expect financial results to be mostly related to costs associated with the program's development during this period. So they say here that technically, if we look year over year, looking at this last earnings report, technically the losses did go up. However, again, we're still staying below what Wall Street is expecting. So that technically is a green flag for the company. Eve reported a net loss of $36.4 million in Q2 versus $31.4 million the year prior. Net loss increased due to higher R&D. These are costs necessary to advance, yes, we know, despite a decrease in selling general and administrative and a positive impact in the fair value of our outstanding derivatives. R&D expenses were $36.3 million versus $21.8 million this time last year, primarily driven by the Master Services Agreement with Embraer, who performs several developmental activities for Eve. Very nice. Including purchase of parts, okay. SG&A decreased from 6.6 to 5.4. Okay, lower payroll. Reduced director and officers' insurance expenses after renegotiating and lengthening terms with our provider. Very good. Benefited from the slight depreciation of the Brazilian currency versus the US dollar. Okay, increase in R&D was partly offset by 2.1 million gain in Q2 related to the fair value of derivatives. Yep, total cash by operations and CapEx was 31.4 million versus 27.8 million. So, we see that some of these costs are going up while others are, technically trickling down slightly, we could say. But we know that, again, as our timeline moves along, these companies in pre-revenue phase, we may have to pump an extra couple of million into our expenses, into our R&D, And even though it might look bad in the immediate short term, for all we know, it may shave, 3 months' time, 6 months' time off of this future, 2-year timeline or whatever it might be, right? So that's why in the immediate short term, something like this, news coming out, yeah, I can understand if the stock goes down a little bit. But also at the same time, like we say, if you take a step back, look at the big picture, this may work out very well for the company over the next year or two, right? The results of these, the results of this increase in spending may not come to fruition for, the next 1 to 2 years. Eve entered into subscription agreements. 95.6 million in new equity financing. Additional funding will strengthen our balance sheet. Yep. Eve's cash was 206 million. Total liquidity would have been 338 million as of June 30th. So we're sitting here with a couple of $100 million now, but obviously, again, we're losing whatever, 30 and change every quarter. So hopefully, what you want to hope for is that the cash that they're holding on hand now, as they say, is hopefully enough to keep them afloat throughout 26, potentially 27. And then obviously, once we start to get the ball rolling, we may not need to see any new cash raises, right? Or any new issuance of equity. 500 million mixed shelf. This was back the end of July, roughly 2 months ago. Potential sale of up to 500 million of its securities. Net proceeds. Yep. Cantor Fitzgerald, $7 price target. Cash needs covered until 2027, right? This is what we were talking about. Prototype to fly by end of 24 or early 25. Well, we're kind of at end of 24, right? So obviously, if this doesn't happen inside of the next 2 to 3 months, then chances are it's going to take place early 25, as they say. Now, if the prototype actually flies, in my opinion, you will probably see a bump up in the stock. I'm not exactly sure if we're going to get another catalyst coming in, comparing it to something like ASTS, where we had, oh my goodness, who was it? It was AT&T first, right? With the 100 million. No. AT&T signed extended the contract, and then Verizon came in like a week or two later with the 100 mil investment, right? So we already know that we have a list of investors into this company behind the scenes, including Rolls-Royce. But also, I don't know if we'll receive a catalyst piece of news like we did with ASTS over the next quarter or two, in my opinion. You understand what I'm saying? But of course, we know anything can happen. One announcement can completely change everything. Eve aims for certification by 26, applied to Brazil's civil aviation regulator in 2022. New $94 million investment extends cash needs coverage to 2027. So far, this seems so good. So far, so good. Showcase for the first time the full-scale prototype of its, quote, flying taxi, achieving a milestone as the company aims to obtain certification and enter service in 2026. Eve, controlled by Embraer, I believe that's how you say it, rolled out its evtol aircraft prototype at an event with investors and clients at the Brazilian plane makers Gavio? My apologies. July 3rd. Anyway, moving on. The company is one of a bevy of startups worldwide developing battery-powered aircraft that can take off and land vertically to ferry travelers on short city trips, allowing them to beat traffic. Eve expects to fly the prototype by the end of this year or early 25, after starting ground tests in July. So see, even though we have this time frame where the prototype, again, was unveiled, and we're going to do a little test run here, again, the stock technically hasn't moved too much off of that news. So this is why I'm saying, off of the prototype actually flying the end of this year or early 25, that may be the first initial bump. But again, at the same time, people may pile in. You may see a lot of volume because they got some good news. So the stock might run up to like $4 or $5. And a lot of people who got in very cheap could potentially flip and make a nice profit. Because in my opinion, even if we do see a bump, whatever, $5, $6 after this news hits, chances are investors and traders are going to re-examine the timeline. They're going to see now that the next milestone may not be till end of 25 or early 26. So a lot of people may, in the short term, take profits off the table and look, 6-9 months later and look to potentially re-enter EVEX. So, we do have the potential for a bump, but it may be short-lived. But we'll see also if any new catalysts come in, if we do have a successful prototype launch, right? So who knows who could throw their hat into the ring or be impressed by the flight of the prototype. So now they're making an investment for a couple of $100 million, right? And then the stock will continue to run up, and basically all negatives might be washed away because of these new positives coming in. So we know with these companies, especially in the startup phase, we have to just kind of take it day by day and piece of news by piece of news. So unfortunately here, with another year or two on the timeline, I really can't give you an exact price level that we can hit, but this is why I drew out that trend line going back from day one, because technically if it does drop down to that kind of all-time support level, you could be looking at sub 1.5. I'm just throwing that out there. The first non-conforming prototype is equipped with electric engines, but does not have a cabin or pilot. The final aircraft will seat 4 passengers and a pilot. So I also just think about, how much is this going to cost if we're only able to, fly around 4 people at a time, right? Because you want to scale it, right? So you would think now, looking at this with only 4 passengers, first of all, you're going to need a ton of pilots, right? If you really want to roll it out and scale it. And also, if you're only carrying 4 people at a time, but it, starts to become popular and people line up to take the RoboTaxi, well, like we said, now you're going to have to make like hundreds of these aircrafts, but they're all only going to fit 4 people. So, you know what I mean? I don't know really how to look at it right now, because it seems like a pretty big vehicle, and we're only holding 4 people plus the pilot. So it's basically like an electric charging helicopter, basically. But I don't know. I know people are pumped about it. So again, if there's popularity behind it, then the stock should do very well, and they should, consistently increase their revenue stream, and then who knows, build double-decker electric vehicles. So now they could hold 12 passengers comfortably instead of 4, right? Who knows? So we know these changes might be coming. But 4 people and a pilot. Quote, this prototype is completely remote, so we can test aerodynamics, start flying, and then make what we call transition flight from vertical to horizontal flight. Very, very impressive. He said having the full-scale prototype ready for test is another step towards certifying the aircraft, which EVE expects to achieve by 2026. EVE applied for certification in 22 to Brazil's civil aviation regulator. EVE will have 5 conforming prototypes ready next year, right? Which again is only 20 passengers. I'm not bashing them, I'm just saying. And a pre-series evtol by 2026 as part of the certification process. Quote, this is a foundation stone, so we can learn and keep going. Challenges exist. It's not something trivial. We are at the limits of technology and aeronautics, and this moment of testing is fundamental. So the fact that they can do this remotely is pretty cool as well, right? Because they can build this craft and then actually take it off and see if there are any problems. Are there issues taking off? Are there issues landing, right? Is it unstable when we hit certain speeds? Does the wind play a factor, right? I mean, who knows? Obviously, they're on top of this, but again, we have to go through this actual prototype trial before we move on to, I guess, human testing, if you will. But power grids around the world are not ready for so-called flying cars, from the electricity supply to ports for vertical takeoff and landing. Huh. But again, technically, I mean, if this company is not going to be ready till 2026, who knows the strides that we can make with the power grids in that time. raised nearly 400 million. Project initially slated to cost 540 million. Company later secured 92 million loan from Brazilian state, and they did the 500 million mixed shelf offering, right? So now we're at just about $1 billion. We're at just about $1 billion. Project initially slated to cost 540 million, because again, they need 30-40 million a quarter as cash burn until they're up and running. So again, hopefully all of these raises was enough, and the company doesn't have to issue more shares, because unfortunately, as we know, that drives down the price of the stock as well. Fresh fund, yep, okay. Gives us comfort we'll be able to keep developing this product until 2027. We had cash for 25, now we are going until 2027. Eve has amassed nearly 3,000 potential orders ahead of production, which it hopes to eventually convert into firm orders. Interested clients include U.S. carrier United, charter firm Global Crossing, aircraft leaser Azora. We do not need, quote, to convert these letters of intent right now, especially with the new investment. So chances are we are waiting for a successful launch. We are waiting and hoping that now a lot of these deals get done, those firm orders, and we get pushed through. 3,000 is a pretty big number. So that's why if they are able to prove that this prototype, works fine and there's no issues, and then you throw some people in there and it's flying fine and everyone enjoyed it and it was safe and it was efficient, well then obviously the orders are going to be finalized. And then of course that's future revenue coming in. So Eve is most likely going to see an immediate pop from that. But probably because there is so much interest, again, I really wasn't aware of that interest, but 3,000 potential orders, not too bad. So the fact that these orders and this interest is percolating behind the scenes, I can kind of understand the fact now that most analysts, as we see, they're looking for $6, $7, $9 a share, with the stock down here at $3. The problem is, like I always say, the quote-unquote fair value of a business and the fact that it's still in this startup phase. If it can get beaten up, it most likely will get beaten up. And that's why I just pointed out that trend line and that potential for the pullback down to the sub 2, roughly 1.5 level. Because that can happen, right? And then the good news can come out, and then all of a sudden it's off to the races and it's back up to 3, 4, 5, right? What is this down here? Eve holding, cuts price target to 8.5 from 9. Still very bullish though. Eve Air Mobility dives to record low after 94 million equity raise. Yep. Sold shares and warrants at 4. Okay. Okay, another article talking about the offering. Okay, another article talking about the offering. So yeah, as of right now, in my opinion, the stock can remain very quiet, might not do too much, until maybe the next couple of months when we hear the company say, hey, listen, we threw up that prototype remotely, we were flying it around, no issues, looks great, you guys are going to love it, right? We get that report, then we might pop up and come back even to something like this, maybe like a 385, potentially 4+. So that is possible, but again, the big drop and then this big rebound here coming out of this earnings report with the tightening kind of does look to me like a rising wedge. So we may continue to climb up, and we could, as you see, get up to maybe 320 or even a breakout to this fib here, 333, and then come back into the apex and then potentially break down over about the next month or so. So you have to keep an eye on these trend lines, and you have to see if it gets up and closes above the top one, does it change momentum and now we're bullish? Or if we start to break down and get below this one, is it now bearish and breaking out of the wedge and we're going to go lower, potentially hitting new lows? Because in my opinion, if we do look at the numbers, we do have potential to go lower. I will say again, the company's been doing very, very well on the loss side. Look at this, going back the last 7 quarters, they only reported a wider than expected loss one time over the last 7 quarters. Annually, obviously missing the mark, not a big deal. We have no revenue, But if we come back here, so the company said they have a couple of $100 million in cash, and we're sitting here with about $52.5 million in debt. We have assets outweighing liabilities in the short term, not in the long term. But I want to show you, if we come over here and look at our balance sheet, we can see that the liabilities going back the last 6 or 7 quarters have now basically quadrupled and have gotten above 100 million, while the assets that were well above 300 million are now down in the low 200 millions. So over the same time frame, the liabilities are up over 300%, while the total assets are down roughly 33%. And that has been eating away at the equity. And as you see, the equity has gone from a touch below 300 million now down to 105 million, which in turn slowly eats away at our book value, as you see, dropping from $1.07 all the way down now to 39 cents. So if you think about it, again, not to try to beat up your company here, if you like them, again, I respect it, and I do see the long-term potential. But even bringing the stock down to that trend line, again, we were looking at what, like 1.5, 140. That would still be like 3.5, 4 times book value. So that's why I'm saying in the immediate short term, you may potentially continue to see the sell-off and ask yourself, what the heck is going on? But again, you need to wait for the timeline to actually materialize, the milestones to be hit, the good news to come out. Because until that happens, the average investor does not see urgency to own shares of this company at the moment, in my opinion. Why force my way in now at $3 a share when I might be able to turn around in 60 days, buy it for $1.60, and then just, start accumulating shares and tuck it away for the next 2-3 years, right? Because we talk about pricing and timing. And that's why I look at it the way I like to look at it, because again, if I don't have to buy it here at 3, then I'll wait and I'll buy it at 2 or sub 2. It's that simple. But technically, this is a rough sign. But again, we know they're in the startup phase. They're in the developmental phase. So, not necessarily a big red flag, but it's definitely something that should be in the front of your mind. And again, if the stock goes down, in my eyes, you really can't be too stunned by that. Okay, we're only trading 7.6 times book. Apparently, another company would pay 818 million, which is about 10% lower than the current value of the company, which is why, again, I may feel pretty confident looking at that rising wedge, expecting a potential break lower sometime soon. Our return percentages obviously are negative. We looked at the earnings, we have no revenue, and let's recheck the forecast real quick. And yeah, we can see everyone pretty bullish on it right now, basically just waiting for the company to complete what it has to complete, go through all the tests and trials, and then boom, we're going to be off to the races. So right now we have 8 analysts covering the situation, 6 giving it a strong buy, 2 giving it a hold, average price target of $6.08 technically, which is roughly 100% move from this current level. Lowest price target 5, highest price target 8. So this is why, again, yeah, if you owned it, back at 4, or you just bought it down here at 3, sub 3, are you technically early? Yeah, I guess. But also at the same time, like we say, something like an ASTS, or even something similar to like a Fubo, like looking at the growth, how the stock's being kept down. If you see the potential and you're buying shares, accumulating a position, building a position, and you're confident saying 3 years from now this is going to be worth significantly more, then, like I say, keep your eye on the prize, block out the noise, and unless this company comes out and says something like, oh, it's going to cost 2-3 times as much as we initially quoted, or, oh, we launched the prototype remotely and it, started smoking and we had to land it, right? Or if one of the investors behind the scenes all of a sudden, pulls the investment or starts trashing the company. You understand what I'm saying? Unless these big negatives start to roll in, then even if the stock drops 40-50% from this value, if you're a long-term holder, it's really not going to make a big difference. So that's why I say, if you truly believe in it, try to block out the noise and just, stay focused, keep your eye on the prize. But Not too bad. This thing does look pretty cool. Again, I know a lot of you may be pumped about the stock, so I'm hoping that when they do launch that prototype test, it goes according to plan and there are no issues. But the stock has been bouncing, slowly climbing up, tightening. As we spoke about, the RSI was sub 30, basically about a month ago, right after those earnings, and it's been slowly climbing up. RSI almost 60 now, which again is why we may keep going up into 3 plus. And if we approach this apex, if this rising wedge is true, we may then break down as the RSI hits 70 and sell off and cool down a little bit. But technically, 50-day moving average 296, stock closed 299. Now this does look like maybe like an undecided candle. So this is why now, after running and breaking up, you may see a little pause back down. But technically, the close above the 50-day moving average is a bullish sign. And the last time it actually closed above the moving average was all the way back here, the tail end of April. And you can see that the stock tried to retest the moving average and then bounced up a little bit, tried to retest and then bounced up again, which is why I'm saying we may now at the moving average run up a little bit and then retest and then flatten and retest and then run up a little bit and then break down. In my opinion, that might be what's happening, but we'll see. Maybe some news is coming. But if we do continue to stay bullish, as I said, I'm looking for maybe around this level right here, looks like about 340 and change. And then you may come up right here, which looks like about maybe 410, 415. So if we do start to chunk up and volume is really continuing to come in throughout next week, you may see a run up to 4 plus. And then because it went on such a run, they may pump it just straight back up to the 200-day of 496 before rejecting it back down into the 3s and the 2s. Only time will tell, but the MACD bullish cross here to the upside about a month ago, and you can see again, we've been, for the most part, predominantly above the mid-Bollinger Band, just sitting at the top range. MACD flying high, but we have to see now if we're going to curl and potentially bear cross, or if we're going to continue and spike up and go parabolic now on this big volume coming in. Again, look at that volume, 3.1 million, average volume 281 million. And I mean, again, look at this, the volume. Look at that volume. You'd have to go literally all the way back to almost day one where that volume came in last time. So this is why, again, we could potentially have a situation taking place behind the scenes. So if you want to roll the dice here at $3, I wouldn't call you crazy. But also at the same time, I wanted to go over their timeline and a couple of milestones they have to hit before they're technically up and running and ready to go. But definitely an interesting story. And, I'll try to keep an eye on it where I can. And, of course, now that we looked at it, if you guys hear any news or any updates that take place, you can just drop a comment on the video. And, I'll come back to it. We'll do a quick update for you. But that's pretty much it. So I'll end it there. Once again, this is Stocks by the Numbers. I want to thank you for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop it down in the comments section. I'm usually pretty quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement. That is how you help me help you. But more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are rocky, they're volatile, and they are very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. I hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.